everyone, welcome to my channel. This is M. Today we're gonna have a deep dive. Life of Christy Turlington, one of the most iconic supermodels of all time. How she managed to become a model, an activist, a supermodel, a wife. And you might think, because she was a 90s supermodel, that she has a very dramatic life. So much ups and downs, but you might be shocked because she has lived a very clean lifestyle. And I just wanted to tell you about her because that's inspiring. Today we're gonna talk about how she became addicted to smoking when she was just 13 years old, and how she thought maybe that's a way of being cool, but then she regretted, and how the death of her father really affected her to become an anti-smoking activist for a whole time, and how she just ran away from bad boys in Hollywood to more stable men because she thought maybe that's a better choice. Why this happened, which relationship of hers really made her into this. And we're gonna verify if there is any real links between Christy Turlington and Jeffrey Epstein, because in the claims her name was mentioned in the blacklist of Jeffrey Epstein, and Jean Brunel always had this claim like, I was the one who scouted Christy Turlington. And this kind of claims are completely normal in the 80s and 90s because they always wanted to boost their reputation, and so they always said that one of the supermodels, they chose one of the supermodels and they said, okay, I was the one who scouted her, I was the one who discovered her. But we're going to see if there was any real links between Christy Turlington and the Jeffrey Epstein. And we should not forget that it was Christy Turlington with Naomi, along Naomi Campbell, who just put navel piercing into mainstream. And before that, it was not so much common, it was not really usual, but they just made it a fashion trend. They were trendsetter of navel piercing. So stay tuned with me, because today at the end we're going to see where's Christy Turlington now. Is she still with Ed Burns, and are they living a very luxurious lifestyle or no? For them, quality matters the most.
Let's start at the very beginning. Christy Nicole Turlington, she was born on January 2nd, 1969 in California. She grew up as the middle of three daughters in a middle-class family far from fame and wealth in the San Francisco Bay Area. From a young age, she was athletic, loved horseback riding, a passion that would actually change her entire life. And no one could have predicted that this California girl would one day become one of the most iconic supermodels in the world. Her father, Dwayne Turlington, he was a commercial airline pilot, training captain for Pan Am. Her mother, Maria Elizabeth, she worked as a flight attendant, and they met through their shared world of aviation and built a life together. And her dad's job meant the family sometimes moving, traveling, and her mom brought a strong, grounded influence into the household. And together they raised three daughters with the values of hard work, education, being and staying true to yourself, and lessons that would serve Christy Turlington in the future incredibly well in the crazy world of fashion. It's interesting actually to watch Christy Turlington face, and you will ask yourself, where is she from? Is she really from America? And you will get the answer right here, that Christy's beautiful heritage comes strongly from her mother's side, that she was born in El Salvador and immigrated to the United States when she was a young child. And her grandfather, he had left El Salvador in the 1940s to create a better life in LA, and eventually bringing the family over. Christy was raised with her mother's Catholic faith and a deep appreciation for her Salvadoran roots. And this immigrant story of resilience, sacrifice, and opportunity has always been a big part of, and later inspired her to do so much good work, especially around maternal health, especially in places like El Salvador, Christy's big break happened in the most unexpected way. They were at that time they were living in Miami, a teenage Christy was out horseback riding with her sister, and she loved horseback riding. And just right in the middle of doing what she loved, a local photographer, Danny Cody, spotted her and thought she had an incredible potential and took some test photos. And she actually told that it was a creepy experience because the photographer told her to look. She didn't even know what that means, and so he sent them to a modeling agency. And at around 13 or 14 years old, her modeling journey just began. She started working part-time. She had a double life. She was a high school girl trying to balancing it with a normal teenage life, going to school. But it was a classic right place, right time moment, that she started one of the greatest careers in the fashion industry. When it comes to being a fashion model in 90s, everyone had so many pitfalls, but with the help of her mother, Christy, she really stayed grounded. She really avoided these pitfalls. One of the biggest reasons that Christy navigated the modeling industry to a successful way and stay grounded, it was her mother. In the early years, when she wasn't that big enough, that adult enough, she traveled with her everywhere, to castings, to shootings, and even to international trips like Rome or fashion shows. And she wasn't just a chaperone, she was a protector and a voice of reason. In an industry full of temptation, pressure, she helped Christy avoid so many common pitfalls that maybe other models didn't have the chance to avoid. And she kept emphasizing education is important. It's important to stay true to your values. It's important to stay true to yourself, and you don't have to really lose yourself because you are famous. And Christy has often credited her mother with keeping her safe, focused during those formative years. And Christy didn't even look at fashion magazines before modeling. And it's something surprising here that before she started modeling, she wasn't obsessed with fashion at all. She had said in interviews that at 13 or 14, she and her friends didn't really read fashion magazines. She wasn't dreaming of becoming a supermodel or studying Vogue covers. She was just a regular sporty teenager who loved riding horses. And that fresh, unspoiled perspective is probably part of what made her so special when she did start. She brought natural beauty, instead of trying to copy what she saw in magazines. And after being discovered by Danny Cody, Christy's career took its first big professional step, and at around 15 or 16 years old, she signed with one of the most prestigious agencies in the world, Ford Models. This was a huge deal, Ellen Ford, the legendary founder, even had young models like Christy stay in her own townhouse in New York, and Ford Models gave her structure, protection, and access to the biggest opportunities. And Christy has often said that signing with Ford felt like joining the best in the business, and it helped launch her from local work to international stardom. And Christy wasn't just dominating fashion and runways and magazine covers, she also appeared in some iconic music videos that helped define the supermodel era. Most famously in the 90s, she starred alongside Naomi, Cindy Crawford, Linda, and Tatiana in George Michael's legendary Freedom 90s video directed by David Fincher, and that video became a cultural moment, And earlier, when she was just 17, she appeared in Duran Duran's Notorious video. And these appearances brought her face to an even wider audience and showed the world that the models were becoming pop culture stars in their own sight. One part of Christy's story that she's been very open about it is her relationship with smoking, and I think she wants girls at her age really be aware of the consequences of the things you start when you are just a teenager and what happens when you grow up older. Like many young models at that time, she started because she thought it made her look more grown up. It's a kind of way to be a cool girl. But by 16, she was smoking nearly a pack a day, and over time, she began to hate it. She felt addicted, unhealthy, and disgusted by the morning routine of coffee and cigarettes, and she realized how stupid it was to be out of breath climbing stairs at such a young age. And the glamour quickly faded, and it became a battle, Christy's modeling career is filled with unforgettable milestones. At the age of 20, she signed a groundbreaking $1 million contract with Calvin Klein, becoming the face of their Eternity fragrance, a campaign she would return to decades later, and she became one of the highest paid models of her time. In the 1993, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York named her the face of the 20th century and even created mannequins and based on her likeness, Along with Naomi Campbell and Linda Evangelista, she formed what the industry called the Holy Trinity of supermodels. These three were booked together constantly and represented the absolute peak of 90s supermodel power and glamour, And let's get back to her smoking. Christy tried to quit smoking so many times, but nothing happened really. One day, at the age of 25 or 26 maybe, she made a firm decision. She simply put the pack down and never picked it up again. No more half measures and no more broken promises. She had described it one of the proudest achievements of her life, a personal victory that gave her confidence in other areas of her life, including finishing her education at New York University. 2 years after she finally quit cigarettes, a tragedy struck. In 1997, Christy's father, Dwayne, passed away from lung cancer at the age of just 64. He had been a heavy smoker for decades, and his death deeply affected her and reinforced her decision never to smoke again. And she had said that after losing her dad, she knew she would never touch another cigarette. This personal loss turned her into a passionate anti-smoking advocate, Even though she had quit years earlier, the damage from her teenage and early adult smoking years had already been done. In the year 2000, Christy was diagnosed with early stage emphysema. She was shocked. She was still young, healthy looking, but the years of smoking had caused permanent damage to her lungs, And this diagnosis made her even more determined to speak out about the dangers of tobacco, and especially to young people. In 2017, during the height of the Me Too movement, Christy spoke powerfully about the dark side of the fashion world. In an interview, she said that the harassment and mistreatment have always been widely known and tolerated in the modeling industry. And she described how the business is often surrounded by predators who take advantage of young models. And Christy emphasized that this problem isn't new. It's been a part of the culture for a long time in the industry, and she called for better protection for younger models. It's shocking today, but back in the 80s and 90s, the fashion industry not only tolerated smoking, in many ways, it admired and it encouraged it. Christy had shared that when she started modeling, smoking was seen as cool, and even helpful for staying teen. Many in the industry looked at young models who smoked almost positively, and this environment made it much harder for her to quit early, or even though she already felt its negative effects. And she even said that when I just gave up smoking, I had a little bit get back my weight, and then it was like fashion shows rejected me and even canceled their shootings with me. Even at the absolute peak of the supermodel era in the 1990s, Christy Turlington stood out for one special quality. She stayed remarkably low-key and drama-free. While the tabloids were obsessed with the wild lifestyle of top models, Christy avoided scandals, she stayed grounded, and kept her personal life private. And she focused on her work, her family values, her education, instead of chasing the spotlight or party scene. And the maturity and quiet confidence made her one of the most respected figures in the industry, And Christy's love life followed a very clear pattern. In her younger years, she dated some well-known Hollywood names like Roger Wilson, Christian Slater, and Jason Patrick, and these were intense, high-profile relationships typical of that era. But over time, it became obvious that Christy was moving away from dramatic bad boy types, and she was looking for something more stable and real. That search led her to actor and filmmaker Edward Burns. They met when he was working as a production assistant reconnected at a charity event in 2000, and they got engaged quickly. They had a brief breakup, but they just reconciled and married, and their relationship has now lasted over 23 years, one of the most stable, low-profile marriages in Hollywood. You know, like many high-profile people in fashion and entertainment, Christy's name appeared in Jeffrey Epstein's address book and documents. However, there's no public evidence or accusation linking her to any illegal activities. In fact, in 2019, Christy was one of over 100 models who signed an open letter demanding better protection and zero tolerance for sexual misconduct in the fashion industry following the Epstein and Victoria's Secret scandals, and she has consistently spoken out against exploitation in modeling. But during the 90s and later, French modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel claimed he discovered Christy Turlington. In that competitive era, such claims were very common and often exaggerated, you know. Multiple people, including photographer Danny Cotty, take credit for first spotting and helping launch her career, but Brunel was a big player in the industry. But I discovered her stories were almost a cliche among agents at that time. And today, Christy Turlington Burns, she added the Burns family into her last name, lives a quiet, high-quality life in New York with her husband, Edward Burns, and they have 2 children, Grace and Finn, and both kids are now grown, and Grace and Finn have pursued their own path, and the family keeps a very private profile, even though she's wealthy. Has never been into flashy displays of luxury. She prefers meaningful experiences, family time, travel for her charity work, and a grounded lifestyle over showing off, you know. She often says she values depth and purpose for more than material things. And it's better you to know, in 2003, after giving birth to her daughter Grace, Christy suffered serious postpartum complications. She hemorrhaged and came very close to dying. And the experience was terrifying. A few years later, when she gave birth to her son in 2006, she was even more aware of the risk, and the personal brush with death opened her eyes to a shocking global reality. Complications during pregnancy and childbirth are leading cause of death for women worldwide, and especially in places with poor medical access. And that life-changing experience became the spark for Christy's greatest purpose. In 2010, she directed the documentary No Woman, No Cry to raise awareness about maternal health, and she founded a non-profit organization, Every Mother Counts. It works to make pregnancy and childbirth safer for women everywhere through education, training, equipment, and advocacy. It has helped nearly 2 million women and invested tens of millions of dollars in programs around the world. And a little fun cultural fact for you to know is Christy helped make navel piercing mainstream. In 1993, she and Naomi Campbell got their navels pierced together in a London hotel room. And Christy then walked the runway with her midriff exposed, proudly showing off the piercing, and the moment was widely covered. Even the New York Times wrote about it, along with Alicia Silverstone and others, and Christy played a big role in turning belly-button rings from something edgy into a major 90s fashion trend that millions of younger women copied. So that was the incredible life and journey of Christy, from a horse-riding California girl with Salvadoran roots to one of the most respected supermodels and voices of our time. She stayed grounded through frame and turned personal pain into purpose and built a beautiful drama-free life on her own terms.
I want to hear from you. Who will be the next supermodel that I should cover? Just write down in the comments